Robin, welcome to the BCI podcast.
Thanks, Manish. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So, just share about your early childhood experiences and what prompted you to start Deciduous Therapeutics.
Yeah, I was born in Pennsylvania in the U.S. My parents got married in India, came to the U.S. in the late 70s, and then I was born in 83. And I think there's always an entrepreneurial culture, when you are sort of, kids of immigrants, where you kind of have to make it count every day. I think I developed a very high risk tolerance as a child through the upbringing, through the way life was, and so just I've always been excited about starting companies, about starting ideas, about initiating things. Even when I was a kid, I used to run lemonade stands, I used to deliver newspapers, used to cut lawns, do landscaping, and it wasn't about money; it was about just hustling to make something happen. I think that was the joy of success, of the joy of like achieving something. I think was interesting to me from a very young age. So well, always been very entrepreneurial, always, always had a sort of disdain for doing something that's more conventional, that's more that other people are already doing that, where my input would not be as impactful. So really focus my career on trying to do things where I think I can add a unique value and unique effort to making something new happen. And that's always been what I've wanted to achieve in my life.
Awesome. So, tell us something about your educational background and the key pivotal moments where you decided on to switch to biotech and why biotech.
Yeah, I think this comes from, childhood and the way I was raised. My parents are both engineers. Um, And so there really wasn't an option to do anything besides something science. I think I brought it up a few times as when I was in high school, even in college, I wanted to do business or accounting, and that just and there's nothing against those fields of studies, just to say that in my family, that just wasn't accepted. When I wanted to switch into accounting when I was a freshman in college, my mom said, you can do accounting in community college, so why don't you just come home and do it here? So um, it was kind of there really wasn't an option for me, but I didn't like it so much in the moment, but I think as I went through it, I understood that having technical abilities and technical understanding of the complex biological topics was really valuable. So that was, I didn't get that when I was 18 years old as a freshman in college, but when I finished the degree and did a BS in biochemistry, I understood that, what I knew after my education was quite valuable and quite interesting, and really, if applied correctly, could be revolutionary when it came to starting new companies, when it came to evaluating other ideas. It was a unique skill set that I was able to develop from listening to what had been done before me, based on my own family.
So you say that it was not driven out of your interest, but rather, it was a compulsion from your parents, like, so you're not allowed to do something easy, right?
Yeah, I think the idea was have a technical background. If
Mhm.
everything goes sideways in your life, you'll have a good technical skill set to be successful and valuable. And I think that
No, no,
was, and
I totally get it. So I have the Indian background and I totally can relate to that. But you know what, I wanted to ask, like, out of all the hard sciences, why biochemistry in particular? Was there a reason?
uh, yeah, I just think you learn about these various metabolic cycles, and just the idea of how complicated your body is, um, your immune biology, your metabolic biology, your brain biology, just the way that the various cycles in your body run. I just was blown away by how complicated yet how under um underappreciated that was. And so when you get in like the Krebs cycle and you learn about all the things that have to happen to you know, um, make you metabolize something, it's like
Mhm.
that's a lot going on. So you just understand biological processes at a very molecular level. I thought that was super interesting. It took me a while to grow up and be mature enough to actually understand it was interesting, but once I did, I really started holding on to it. I thought it was just fascinating that these things could be happening without our understanding all the time. And then it became about how do we modulate them to be efficacious as we age, and therapeutic interventions we could also initiate to help with these things. So it just became once I grew up a bit, I think it became very interesting and very compelling to me.
Amazing. So tell us more about, what you did post your degree. So you completed your BS in biochemistry, and then how did
Yep.
you move to, deciduous. So we'll dig the
Yeah.
deciduous building of deciduous later, but just tell us the journey before that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll intertwine kind of the personal decisions behind it. So like I said in the beginning, I have a very sort of high risk tolerance, even professionally, which may or not be for everybody. But I finished school and I was working in the Cleveland Clinic, and I had a good time doing it, but the translational aspect of what I was doing in the Cleveland Clinic didn't make sense to me. So not to say the research was interesting, but we weren't going to make a new drug or a new device. That wasn't part of the lab's plan. So the kind of the end goal of what I was doing in research wasn't what I was excited about. What I was excited about shortly after leaving school was I heard a venture capitalist speak about seed stage investing in company creation. And I just thought like all these academic ideas, all this academic work going into, you know, into what? I just couldn't understand, where there's so much work going on in academic labs and government labs. What is it all going towards? And so when I heard a VC speak about, seed stage company creation and investing in, I thought that's like it was so interesting to me. I could not let that idea go. It became like the dream job in an instant. That's all I wanted to do. And so I was fortunate that I was able to meet the VC who spoke about it. I was able to get a shot with him. I did not get paid for that. I did not, I was underqualified and didn't have any experience, but I was willing to work. And he gave me a shot, and eventually turned out pretty well. We did a couple company creations. One of them turned out exceptionally well. Um, I think at that point I was probably just more lucky in the right place than anything else, but I didn't really, I kind of didn't know what I was doing in the beginning, but started to figure out. But I just that kind of whet my appetite for company creation and being part of early stage spinouts. I went from the venture group. I realized from that experience I really liked operating companies more so than actually investing in them, and I think investing up was very interesting for a while, but really what I wanted to do was to be in the middle of it and actually creating the company myself with a small team. So I started working on spinouts in my 20s. I created a company out of University of New Mexico way back, just to learn how the spinout process happens, how licenses happen, how you evaluate new ideas. Took that experience and was able to land a job with an investment bank in New York, but I was able to carve out a niche at the investment bank where they said you can go and start and evaluate companies to spin out and to create from universities around the country. So that became very interesting to me for a couple of years. Spun out a few companies. They're all around still today. That was, 14, 15 years ago now, 17 years ago, actually. Um, and from that experience, I realized, I once I kind of outgrew the investment bank, I thought, I could just probably do this on my own with a small team. I didn't really need a bigger infrastructure around me at that point. And so I started a company called Alzeca Bio in Texas, about 13 years ago now. And we basically created a new way to image the brain to identify biomarkers of Alzheimer's and other neurological disorders. So we developed an amyloid platform technology. We could image amyloid in the brain using MRIs. Then we also eventually made a tau approach to it, and then eventually in the background now also the company's also done an alpha-synuclein approach. So ways to kind of triangulate neurological disorders with real live imaging of patients. And so that comes in the clinic right now. It's done pretty well. Quite proud of it. And eventually, I learned from my work in diagnostic imaging that I really wanted to be in therapeutics and work on things that can be interventionally really impactful and revolutionary. And so that brought me to Deciduous several years ago, where we again early stage idea, just had a dream and vision to want to understand how the immune system changes with age and what happens as a result of that. And then on the translational side, can we restore immune function to treat multiple diseases of aging? So that was the goal, and still is the goal of Deciduous.
So, Robin, all that sounds too easy when you speak, right? But I'm sure like there would be a lot of challenges because how did your first break into VC came? Like you did your biochemistry, and it's not that easy to move into a VC firm, right? So,
Yeah,
and our listeners are all like, biotech graduates, PhD students who want to kind of move into that world. So,
yeah.
just tell us about the challenges or how you carved your, path.
Yeah, that's a very fair comment. I think sometimes after it's been so many years, you kind of forget all the struggles you went through. So but I can remember them, so I'll go back to them now. So, and when I graduated school, I was not passionate about my research job for the reasons I mentioned. I was fortunate where I went to a conference around that time when I was just about to finish school, and I started learning about it was a venture capital nanotechnology conference in Pittsburgh where I was born.
Hmm.
And I was just in the right room at the right time where I heard somebody speak about venture capital investing, and it just hit me so hard that I couldn't think about doing anything else, period. And so when I wasn't good at talking to people at that point. I was young, I was inexperienced. I doubt my suit fit properly. I didn't have a lot going in terms of professional expertise, but I did want to do that job. And so I just approached the speaker, who's actually now one of my best friends and has invested in all of my companies and was at my wedding. And I just said, I just want to work with you. What does that look like? And he said, you seem nice, but no. And then I said, but I really, really want to. I can't say it's enough. I really want to. I don't care if you pay me. I just want to do it. I just want to do the work. And he said, that could work. You could just be an unpaid intern. And I thought, okay, that's a shot I need. That's the door's open. I'll be, I'll tell you very candidly, I didn't have any money. So, living, paying rent, buying food was a challenge for many months. There were times where I would eat, at the bottom at the end of the cupboard and just hope that it wasn't gonna make me sick. Sometimes it did. But I went through a lot, but I really enjoyed the work. And I think that was the end of it, it didn't matter. Nothing else around me mattered at that point because I really was enjoying my career. I think that was the biggest thing I learned as a young person is you can enjoy your career all day, every day. It's the right career. It's not always gonna be pretty, but you could be excited to go to work every single day. Like that's possible. And I don't think I knew that until I got into the company creation, seed stage investing phase of my life. But yeah, I went through a lot. I didn't, I cut every corner I could to not spend money. I just had to be very, very frugal. Um, and eventually, I did well enough where I got the fund raised some money. My boss said, you've been working your tail off without pay for many months, and I'm gonna start paying you, a proper salary. And that was one of the best
Wow.
moments of my life. So
Wow.
I've just repeated
No.
that over and over again in my life.
Wow. So, I mean, this is a great message, right? Like, if you find something that you're excited about, go volunteer, So it shouldn't be
Yeah.
about the money in the beginning. Eventually, if you get better at the work, they will pay you, right? And this is what
Yeah.
exactly happened to you. And how long was that? Like, how long were you slogging or living through frugal
It
means? How long was that period?
was a good 6 months. It probably felt a lot longer because when it's 6 months, you don't know how long it's going to last.
Hmm.
And so when the check showed up on my desk that one afternoon, I mean, it was like you just kind of exhale. And then, but I'll be fair and tell you, it's happened to me multiple times in my career to get to the next thing.
Hmm.
I've always had to do that. Even when I started my last biotech company, Alzeca, I didn't get anything for the first 10 months. We were just thinking and iterating and trying to push some data. And it just, took a while to get it going. But again, when I got that check after 10 months of just being a volunteer, it was very meaningful. And it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough
Hmm.
to know that, if you do the right thing and you put your heart and soul into it, eventually you'll get there and eventually you'll get better and things will get easier. That's not true. Maybe things are going to get easier, but you get better is what I've
Hmm.
learned. So, but it's a mentality I've always carried, even as, in my 20s now, in my 40s, if I really love something, I'll just go and do it. And I don't care about the immediate rewards. I just want to do it and do it well. And then I feel like the rewards will show up when they're supposed to. But it's not, mentally in the moment, it's obviously not easy, but it can be done.
Awesome. Awesome. That's so amazing. So, I mean, so of course, as a professional, you learned how to invest in the companies, how to kind of, um, you know, say get the returns, the proper returns from company. But when was the bug, the entrepreneurial bug that bite you that, you want to kind of build your own company?
Yeah, I
Because
think it was
that
just
is
from,
different than investing in some other companies, right? It's
yeah.
quite a different journey, yes.
Yeah, I think it was, when you're an investor, you're saying, here's, we've evaluated this, here's
Hmm.
the money to go and build what you think you want to build, what we think you're going to build. And then after that, it's pretty hands off, right? I mean, some investors get very involved, some are very hands off, some are, the good ones are probably straddle line between the two. Um, but I think as an investor, I wanted to be in the middle of building. I got more joy from making than watching.
Hmm.
And so that became really important to me. I just needed to wanted to learn more by being in the thick of it, and I just was probably too nosy of a person to keep myself out of it. So I thought, I'm gonna either be a bad investor or I can be a good operator. And so I try to choose, try to be a good operator. And, if I go back to investing at some point later, great. But I know that I'm too nosy to want to stay out of it. So
Mhm.
that was kind of the first part of it.
Mhm. And in say the biotech space, the companies are quite science driven, right? Research driven. And given you don't have a PhD or a very high research background, how did you
Yeah.
identify these opportunities? Because these are like all state of the art technologies that you're working on currently. So how did you go about identifying this problem or pain point, and then build company around it?
Yeah, so over my career, I've developed a really intensive vetting template. And so it goes from business considerations, competitive, IP, molecule modality, freedom to operate, IP, licenses, manufacturing, POC, models, the translational nature of the models. But I have a very exhaustive template I use, and I go through and I read as much as I can, and I evaluate as much as I can on my own, and try to basically come up with what the answers myself first, and then I go and test those with the network that I've put together. So I've typically been good at meeting a lot of people at conferences. I try to help um, folks whenever I can. And then as we've gotten to know each other over the years, if I call them with a question, it's typically a very friendly, warm, quick response if I'm curious about something that I'm considering doing. And so I've just been able to be very fortunate to have a good network of humans around me where I can pick up a phone or send a text and get replies back pretty quickly on, something that I may be looking at that's new. So it's just, first it has to pass my filter if I want to do it, care about it, does it make sense? And then it's got to pass, multiple layers of filters that I have in place with other people. And then I've got to go test it a bit with investors and hear what questions are coming back because I might have missed them. And if there's some questions in it that are coming back that are potential showstoppers, I've got to think about it. How am I going to navigate that? And do I want to navigate it? So that's always, once you sign up, you got to be all in. So you got to be mindful about what you sign up for.
So how did you, I mean, this this is totally, what it takes. So how did you identify that, you want to work in this, field of senolytics and stuff like that? So tell us about the journey of, Deciduous, basically. How did you
Yeah,
start?
it actually started, many years before it started the company. I mean, Senolytics had been interesting for many years, probably a decade before I even got in the field. What I thought was interesting was that if you just remove these senescent cells by itself, that can resolve a number of different diseases. And so that paradigm really surprised me. So I didn't expect just removing bad cells could actually improve so many different diseases. I felt like we could slow them down maybe, or maybe halt in some cases, but I didn't see the reversal piece of it coming into play until I actually saw the data. And so that really surprised me. I thought that so I thought the space was compelling for that reason. The challenge then in the space that I didn't like and why I didn't jump in right away is I looked at the molecules that people were using, and most of them were reprogrammed cancer drugs. And so you just think, is there really a crossover here that's going to be translationally successful, right? So can you really take a cancer drug and apply it to senescence in a way that's translationally successful? And I didn't see that happening because many of those drugs that have been reprogrammed for senescence removal are, they have multiple off-target effects. And so in a preclinical study, in a paper you want to publish, you're not going to see that because that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for does it make disease better in the acute phase, but you're not going to look at, the off-target effects or the safety profile in an in-depth way. So I saw the first generation, even second generation of Senolytics being compelling as a proof of principle, but I saw the translational piece to be quite a challenge. And I think that's proven out to be true in the last several years where a lot of these approaches are impactful in papers but they never translate into the clinic. There's been very few companies have actually translated senescence removal strategies into the clinic. So I think that's proven to be correct. Deciduous said that was interesting because we went at it from a completely different angle. We didn't, we kept the idea and the motivation that senescence removal was going to be impactful. But what we did is that was interesting is we figured out how the immune system naturally regulates senescent cells when you're healthy. So the idea
Mhm.
became just, hey, this happens when you're healthy. This is a good thing. Unfortunately, as you age and with disease, that immune function starts to go sideways. But therapeutically, can we just restore normal immune function towards senescence removal? So can we just restore nature to what it already was? So it's a very simple idea, technically complicated,
Hmm.
therapeutically complicated, but simple premise. And I thought, if we could do that, the safety profile is probably going to be very clean, and the impact should also be quite high. So we can hit not just an evolution in therapies, but a revolution of therapies. And that's what I was after. I really want to do something that I thought could be revolutionary, not evolutionary.
Hmm. No, no, amazing. I mean, I have that background in aging science, so I totally understand that. But if you were to explain this to a layman, just
Yeah.
tell us, what senescence is and what's the approach that, Deciduous takes in
Yeah.
curing aging, basically, but for a layman.
Sure. So I would say, first of all, I don't know that we're ever going to cure aging. I think we're going to hopefully find ways to target multiple diseases in parallel, to improve the length of the health span. So
Hmm.
extending health span is really the goal here. The way it works is this. So first, senescent cells, what are they, and why should anyone find them interesting? So these are cells that have been permanently damaged. So something has happened to these cells. It can be injuries, it can be diets, it can be ROS, a reactive oxygen species, it can be high glucose. Telomeres become short. They become, when they become too short, the cells become senescent. There's multiple things that causes cells to become irreversibly damaged. And so typically we consider that to be the beginning of a senescent phase where it's an irreversibly damaged cell that's not going to go back into cell cycle. So it's in permanent cell cycle arrest. It's permanently damaged. And typically, these cells become inflammatory. And when they become senescent, they go, where they start to give us this inflammatory milieu. And from an evolutionary perspective, that inflammatory signal is meant to say to the immune system, hey, there's a problem here. Come and remove me.
Hmm.
The immune system, when you're young and healthy, will respond very quickly to that inflammatory flare.
Hmm.
What happens with age and with disease is that that inflammatory signal doesn't get picked up by the immune system as effectively or as efficiently as it did when you were younger and healthier and disease free. So you kind of this nice senescence immune balance when you're young, but over time, the senescence the cells accumulate and your immune function just can't keep up. And so that's the problem. And so that's fundamental aging, actually, is what I've just described. And so therapeutically, what we figured out is that if you can just restore immune cells and specifically natural killer T cells, they have their senolytic abilities, but they just need to be boosted therapeutically from time to time. And so we've shown with our data that if we give one dose of our natural killer T cell therapy, it's an agonist therapy, it activates the NKT cells, but that in and of itself results in removing senescent cells and in resolving both metabolic and fibrotic diseases back to almost baseline levels. So that was the data that really got me.
Wow. Now that sounds amazing. But in this highly research-driven field, uh, things are very complicated. I mean, there are many regulatory hurdles, many challenges, right? Because of course, on one hand, you see the effect, but there's also like unknown side effects, right? So what has been the major challenges so far in developing these therapeutics?
Yeah, I think for us, it's always, I think for any early stage biotech, it's always which compound do you want to spend the money on developing into humans? And so you've got to have a nice thick in vivo package. You've got to have a nice translational package, a nice PK, PD package, a nice safety package. You got to know the manufacturing, the scalability. How do you get, from research grade synthesis to, clinical grade synthesis and steps, that's all stuff that's very unsexy, but very important. And so if you kind of establish this Venn diagram, here's everything we have to do to make this our clinical candidate. And you do that and you learn as you go. And sometimes you fail on a couple of those and you got to go back to make a tweak to the molecule or a tweak to the synthesis or the um how the molecule is scaled up, and then you just keep going. But it's an iterative process. It can be frustrating, it can be rewarding, depending on which day of the week it is. But that's how you decide. You just have to decide, this is the one we want to push in the clinic.
Amazing. And just tell us about, the current research focuses up. So what is happening at Deciduous at this point of time?
Yeah,
And
so
are there any particular breakthroughs that excites you? No.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say, I see it most days. I'm not, it excites me, but I'm more also focused on. We probably spend less time obsessing over the good stuff than we do on the challenges. So probably have 80% of my attention on trying to fix whatever challenges we're faced at the moment. But um, right now, we've shown that both we can resolve both metabolic diseases and lung fibrosis. So it's really compelling data. We show in our lung model that we can induce fibrosis in animals, but then
Mhm.
with our drug, we can uh, resolve the fibrosis by about 75 to 80%.
Wow.
Um, the gene expression goes down of the collagen genes. The lungs look a lot cleaner. They look almost normal again. Um, so putting the translational package has been really super interesting. Just seeing not just a couple endpoints move for us, but all of them moving towards what would look like if you could do that in a human, it would be a revolution for the disease. So that's
Wow.
really the next thing for us is, can we this data we're seeing right now consistently in mice, can that translate one to one into a human?
Humans.
And if it does, it'll be a revolution.
Wow. No, so you have basically two approaches. One is, of course, compound based, right? And the other is, you said, also cell based, as in cell therapy, right?
No, there's no cell therapy approach.
But you said like you are introducing NKT cells, to clear immune
Oh,
cells. Oh,
yeah, let me clarify. So the molecule we have actually activates endogenous
got
NKT
it.
cells already inside. So we don't need to take them out
Mm-hmm.
and activate them. You can do that. That approach does work, but
Mm-hmm.
for scalability and for safety, if you don't need to do that, it's a plus.
Mm-hmm. 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 So, and I mean, aging is a hot field right now. There are so many companies working, parallelly. You are not the only one working on
No.
Senolytics there. Also, so what are the current trends? What do you think most promising happening in this field?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way I see the field, and I love talking about this. So, I think there are these aging mechanisms, right? So senescence is one aging
Mechanism.
mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Mitochondria is another. Telomeres are a third. And so you kind of have this wheel of aging mechanisms. There's typically six associated hallmarks of aging, um, which you can talk about. So the value is not in knowing, those pieces by themselves. The value is understanding that each of those targets, senescence, telomeres, mitochondria, et cetera, if you modulate those just individually, it will likely have multi-organ impacts. So think about it, right? So when you have senescent cells accumulating, it's typically not happening in just one organ system. It's happening as you age, it's typically happening in multiple organs at once.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a systemic approach to modulating that back to where it should be, you will have a multi-organ effect on disease. So think about as you are 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old, your risk of having multiple diseases in parallel is very high as you get older. And so the value prop here is that you can potentially have a systemic therapy that can modulate these hallmarks of aging. And if you do that correctly, it'll have a multi-organ impact. So this idea that you've got to take one drug for your heart, one drug for your liver, one drug for your kidney, one drug for your brain, one drug for your muscles, I don't think biotech needs to be that way if you do it correctly. So if you can really modulate these hallmarks of aging systemically, you will have multi-organ impacts with one treatment. And that's the value proposition that is sitting in the longevity field that we can capitalize on that other industries don't think of it that way. They're very siloed into lung disease, heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, brain disease, autoimmune, et cetera. But I'm telling you, there's mechanisms that run across multiple diseases at once that if you can modulate them, you've got a winner.
Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, you would be aware of David Sinclair and
Yes.
and many other star scientists in the field.
Yeah.
And I've seen them talking about taking supplements, like rapamycin mTOR is another pathway, which I was fortunate to also talk with Pankaj Kapai from Buck Institute.
Yeah.
So as you said, there's a complete wheel, and a lot of things are happening around the wheel, right? Uh, But how do you see the supplement industry developing around aging? And do you take any supplements?
Yeah. I'm not the supplement guy. I really I think the data for me is really what drives things.
Hmm.
So the supplements, I feel like, so the pluses of supplements are you don't need full FDA, approval. You have to go through multiple clinical studies to show that there's an effect here and that, it can get approved. You can kind of make claims and say this is based on data what we think this is going to do. I mean, obviously the safety profiles is what's allowing you to put it in the market very quickly.
Hmm.
Whether or not it works and how much you got to take of it and what the long-term effects are, those aren't studied. And so that's the problem I have with the supplement field. The volume of pills that people take, I think, are a bit much for me personally. I don't see the value in taking tens of pills. Some people take hundreds of pills per day. It just seems like there's got to be a better way. I'm not denying that it can have a positive impact. I'm just saying that it seems like a lot of maintenance for
Hmm.
being unable to measure the gains.
Hmm.
Um, so for me, what I do, I'm pretty straightforward. I prefer to do things naturally whenever I can. So I decided 5 or 6 years ago to stop eating breakfast most
Hmm.
days. So not every day, but at least 5 days a week. I skip breakfast, try to eat within 6 to 7 hours window every day. Mostly a plant-based diet. So I really don't, I gave up meat and especially red meat and chicken, and most dairy and animal products about 8 years ago. So that's been a
Hmm.
good impact. Then exercise, cold immersion, just normal things that aren't like a stretch, just things that we know are good for us that we can do every
Hmm.
day without thinking too
Yeah, I
much
mean,
is
one thing, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one thing that, I think you have quite like agreement among all scientists that, calorie restriction is, I mean, of course, that induces autophagy and then, helps you kind of anti-age, so to say, right? Like, so that is where like most of the scientists agree. But as you rightly said, the supplement field is quite controversial, and people have different opinions about different supplements, and that you avoid, right?
yeah, I really don't do any supplements. I mean, sometimes vitamin D if I'm sick, but
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
about it.
Awesome, awesome. So, I mean, this podcast is most popular among PhD graduates, who are looking for, building their careers and stuff like that. So, if somebody wants to be an entrepreneur like you, or somebody wants to start their company, what advice would you give to them? How should they go about it?
Yeah, very general first, I'd say, the best way to get something done is to get started.
Hmm.
So if you want to do something, just start, right? That's number one. You can outthink yourself all day in the lab, but what's the point? Two, I would say make sure it's gonna be something that you feel passionate about it because there's gonna be highs and lows. And during the lows, if you don't feel passionate about it, you're not gonna want to do it anymore. So you need to find something that like you're really willing to like go through the thick and the thin with and see it through. Saying that's number two. Then three, do your research. You can't, I see some people spin out, they're enthusiastic, they're hardworking, they haven't figured out the value prop or actually how to build the company or what they're gonna or what all the parameters around the considerations are for why people would invest or not invest, all the diligence around it. So you've got to do your own diligence as an entrepreneur. You've got to understand if what you're going to build actually will be useful and what are the risks to it becoming useful and understand those going in because you're going to tackle them anyway. So I think that's the lean line is a program piloted by Steve Blank. And I was a part of it for a couple years where I took it as a student and I ended up teaching it. I still mentor it on occasion. But it basically gives you a roadmap of what you need to answer before starting a company to make sure it's actually a viable company. So it talks about understanding your competitors, your customers, your investors, the payer behavior, the IP landscape, it just is a canvas and you've got to go in and fill it out each part of it each week. So it takes about 10 weeks to do the whole program. But once you've done it, you understand what you need to build in order to give yourself a chance of success. It may also you may do and realize that what you thought you're going to build is not what you should be building because the feedback you get early on, well, if you pitch an idea like if I did this, would you be interested? If you hear no many times, then you probably should rethink, whether or not it's worth building. So I would say to anyone, if you want to be tactical about it, go do the Lean Launchpad approach to it. You can do it free online. It's not, you don't have to go to a class or have it cost you a lot. You can go look it up. So that combined with, starting quickly and then also having a deep passion, I think if you do those three things, I think you're probably in a good spot to get something off the ground.
Awesome. And you mentioned, that entrepreneurs have their own ups and downs. I mean, highlight some of the, major challenges that you have faced, what stands out and how did you kind of solve those?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and it kind of goes in waves. I think sometimes you just got to tread water. Sometimes you're riding the wave and it's great. Sometimes, it feels like you're just, staying afloat. In the market, it impacts that quite a bit. The market in 2019, 2020, early 2021 was pretty amazing for biotech. But then when it went south, it went hard south very fast.
Hmm.
So I think, and so a lot of companies that raised too much at too high valuations in the 20s, 2020 and 2021, all started to really struggle when it came time to cut burn, um, minimize programs, it's harder to spend less. It's always easy to spend more. So I think that's been a challenge for everyone in the industry. I just think you got to be disciplined. I always, it doesn't matter to us how much money we have in the bank. My philosophy is always do not waste. I'm very clear about that. That's the way I was raised, and I don't like waste at all. Um, and then beyond that, as my uncle told me one day, it's hiring is um, sometimes you can hire good people who may not be good for you. And so you've got to find a good group of people that actually work well with you and vice versa, right? It's got to go both ways. But there's a lot of talented people out there. Doesn't mean everyone should be working together. So,
Hmm.
that's been another lesson where I've learned to kind of vet not just for great resumes and great experience, but also great cultural fits. Um, and then beyond that, raising capital is never, even when you do it, it seems easy. It's never that easy. So, just sometimes people will say no and it has nothing to do with you. And so I just think, when that happens, don't take it personally, but always be grateful to those who actually, do believe in you and do support you, not just with their words, but with their investment. And so, you probably get one yes for every 10, 15 no's. And that's what it is. And you gotta push through and keep going because you don't need everyone to believe in you, but you need a small group to do it. And so just focus on, you don't need a lot, but you can have a lot of no's, but as long as you've got a couple of yeses, you're okay.
Amazing, amazing. So, this question I ask to most CEOs that I speak to, because different people have different leadership style. So, what do you think a CEO role in a biotech company is, apart from, raising capital and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it changes as the company stage changes, right? I think in the beginning it's about generating as much compelling data as quickly as possible in order to suggest to the outside world they should be putting more money and attention into this. Saying that's whatever that takes. If that means you're at the lab, at the bench, that's okay. If it means you got to hire two people, it means you got to outsource it. Whatever it means, you just got to do it. Um, and then as a CEO, you've got to be scrappy and find the initial funds to believe in the vision that you've set out. And so I think the first raise is kind of about vision and the goals that you want to achieve and why you think you're going to achieve them and how grand is the vision if you actually achieve it. I think that's the first phase, and I think that's one skill set. The second skill set really becomes about now that you've gotten some data, how do you push it into the clinic, right? So how and that's a different set of skills, right? Because now you actually have some data slides to show, and so can you articulate a vision for how quickly this can get in the clinic and how successful it can be? And if it is successful, how will that change that entire indication, right? So how would it change lung fibrosis or metabolic disease? Those are the questions we got to answer. And then do you have the team to do it? And then do you know how much it's going to cost to get to the inflection point where, you can raise the next round or where farmers should want to partner? Like those are all the considerations. So I think it becomes very visionary in the beginning to very tactical
Mhm.
and timeline driven in the second phase.
And how do you navigate the growth journey? Like, I mean, you had successful companies before. So once the company grows, of course, the role changes drastically, right? So how do you navigate the change?
I think just being open to change, I think you have to be nimble, you have to be flexible. And there's a reason why some CEOs are better as startup versus Series A versus Series B. So I think you have to be willing to change and adapt and understand that what it took to get you there may not be everything it takes to get to the next step. And so you just have to be open to that and mindful that, your old tactics, while great and served you a nice purpose, may not be the best tactics to get you to the next stage. So you have to be very mindful and open to adjusting your approach. It doesn't mean you lose who you are, it just means that you do what's required of the company as the company grows.
Amazing. So, I mean, now tell us about, like, a CEO schedule is quite busy. So what do you do for, leisure? What do you do normally as a hobby?
Oh, you mean outside of the job?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm super simple. Work out in almost every morning at 5 or 6 in the morning, and then get ready, take the kids to school, and then come here. I love to cook in my free time. I find that very cathartic.
Awesome,
Yeah,
awesome, awesome. And finally, any last piece of advice that you have for biotech graduates who want to be entrepreneurs? Any final advice?
yeah, just know that most people are probably going to be afraid or slow or too risk averse. And so it is competitively, it is a sustainable advantage if you are have a high risk tolerance, if you are determined, if you are willing to go past all the no's or all the negativity you see from other people. You're going to see a lot of it. It's going to happen. Most people can't fathom creating a company or starting a company or leading a company. So people are going to be negative about that. That's okay. Let them be. If you're not, that means you are in a different um, place, different percentile of ability and of skill set. So just embrace and be proud of that. Because most of the world's going to be pretty, looking for the bumpers and the handlebars, whereas your job is kind of to ride the unicycle and make it look good. And so I just think very few people are actually willing to do that. And so if you are, you're already a step ahead of everybody else. Isn't, but it will be lonely. So it is what it is.
Absolutely. So, on that note, Robin, thank you so much for being part of the BCI podcast. I
Sure.
wish you a nice day. Thank you so much. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Manish.
Robin.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.